the term UFO has such pop culture baggage to it that it lends itself to ridicule. Some of it deserved, much of it not. Yes, there are some fake videos on YouTube and some fairly wild claims circulating, but don't let's throw out the baby with the bathwater. There is some good data there. There are some reliable testimonies from witnesses and experts. There are some very important and compelling government documents now declassified under the Freedom of Information Act. There are some good photos and videos, and I saw some of those at the Ministry of Defence. And there are, for example, radar tapes that in many cases corroborate visual sightings from pilots. So I'm here really to say to people there is some sort of phenomenon here that even those of us who looked at it in government can't necessarily explain, and it's worthy of people's time. I worked for the Ministry of Defence for 21 years, and for 3 years, 1991 through to 1994, I was seconded onto the UFO project. Now, I had mixed feelings when I was asked to do this. On the one hand, of course, I couldn't help but be a little bit curious. What are we doing looking at this subject at all? Do we know anything? What's going on? On the other hand, I had some qualms as well. I was a little concerned, for example, that it might look a little bit funny on my internal Ministry of Defence CV. Looking back at it now, it was a fascinating and life-changing decision to take that job, and I'm certainly glad I did. I think it opened my eyes and my mind to some pretty fantastic possibilities. When I joined the MOD's UFO project, I was skeptical. I really didn't know anything about the subject. I had no belief in it really whatsoever, but I applied myself to the job in hand, investigated each of the cases that came my way to the best of my ability, and I looked into about 200 or 300 cases each year. I delved back into the huge archive of files dating back to the 50s that my predecessors on the UFO project had handled. And the more I looked, the more I began to, I suppose, change my mind somewhat, and my views, I suppose, evolved in the light of exposure to this data. And I realized, well, wait a minute, this isn't all just aircraft lights and weather balloons. We've got reports in here from our own military pilots. We've got accounts of how UFOs were simultaneously being tracked on military radar while pilots had visual sightings of them. And I don't think you would say I was a sort of fully paid up true believer, but I certainly am, I think, more open to the possibility than I was. And as I often used to say at the Ministry of Defence, the skeptics have to be right every single day, but the believers only need to be right once. It's interesting when one looks at, I suppose, denial in relation to the UFO phenomenon. Now, sometimes you hear a lot of people disparage true believers, and all sorts of pejorative terms are used, whether it's conspiracy nuts or airhead, kind of saucer-headed true believers, whatever. And yes, of course, to blindly believe in something with no evidence is foolish. And there's no getting away from the fact that there are a lot of people who want to believe, and believe in a very unscientific way. But one can flip that 180 degrees and say there is an equally kind of conclusion-led group who desperately don't want to believe. And that's equally faith-driven as the kind of true believers. So what you have with the UFO phenomenon is this kind of spectrum of belief. The true believers at the extreme end and the absolute die-hard debunkers at the other, they're actually the same kind of mindset. And the funny thing is, those of us who've looked at it from within government, we're far less sure. We're far less dogmatic about it than all these people. Humans have always, I think, been fascinated by the sky. Since the dawn of humankind, we've looked up into the sky. We've worshipped the sun and the moon. We've been fascinated by the stars. Our ancestors, when they heard thunder and saw lightning, attributed it to warring gods. We've always placed our gods in the sky, and arguably still do. Over the years, maybe some of that fascination has been lost, but I think one factor that people really now find difficult to grasp is in a sense, how less spectacular the night sky is now due to light pollution. In ancient times, when night fell and the stars came out in a way that we really, most of us don't appreciate now, and that's the sense of wonder that we've lost, and that maybe to some extent explains why people aren't as fascinated as you would think and hope they would be. What can we do to get that back? Well, actually there are a number of initiatives to cut down on light pollution precisely for this reason. But I think the other tool that we have, and it's a slight cheat of course, but it is our telescopes, and particularly Hubble. It's given us a new window on the universe. So we even if we live in a city and we can't really appreciate the stars with the naked eye, we can perhaps see through the Hubble Space Telescope images of the cosmos that will, I hope, restore that sense of wonder. But I would urge anyone, there's no substitute for seeing it for yourself, so I would urge anyone who has a chance to go on a vacation to a remote area free of light pollution to do that, and you will really, I think, look with fresh eyes at the night sky. What we're looking at is obviously reported UFO sightings. We have no idea the true number of annual UFO sightings for a number of different reasons. Firstly, most people who see something unusual don't make a UFO report at all, either because they're afraid that they'll be ridiculed or not believed, or because they don't know who to approach. Some people report to a UFO organization like the Mutual UFO Network in Canada, and I think they were the ones who did this recent study. But there's no one single person or organization drawing any of this together, so we must always be careful when we talk about an increase in sightings. Pretty much the only thing we can say for sure is that there are many, many more UFO sightings out there than we ever get to hear about. When I was running the UK's UFO program, there was minimal liaison with other countries. I mean, really, even going back in the files to the 50s, I could probably count on, one, maybe two hands, the number of times we had approached or been approached by another country on this issue. For whatever reason, nations tend to do this subject in isolation. Now that's a mistake. Obviously it's a global phenomenon, whether it's between Canada and the UK, Canada and the US and the UK, there really isn't international liaison and cooperation on this subject, which, as I say, is a mistake given the truly global nature of this phenomenon. It's an unfortunate situation, and it's not that insular approach is not unique to Canada or the UK or the US. In my experience, it's something one finds all around the world. People are fascinated with the subjects of UFOs, the search for extraterrestrial life. If you look at opinion polls, belief in alien life usually comes in at or over 50%. Belief in extraterrestrial visitation is similarly, I think, quite high. Belief that governments are not being totally forthcoming about everything they know on this subject is even higher. But you know, I do notice an upsurge in interest, more conferences, more TV shows, more radio programs, more discussion of the possibilities in the mainstream media. Even the number of times that the question comes up, say, in the US presidential campaign, whether we have President Obama going on chat shows, getting asked about this subject, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton talking about when he was president. This question always comes up in a way that it really didn't 10 years ago. I have been involved in this subject, I suppose now for 25 years. I continue to be interested and involved in that. I can't see that changing because questions like, are we alone or not in the universe? That's one of the biggest and most profound questions we can ask. And my goodness, if we can get an answer, we'll push for it.